So again, Captain Dylan Hubbard from Hubbard's Marina, and Hubbard's Marina has been fishing local waters for over 90 years in 4 generations. We do a little bit of everything from party boat fishing to private charter fishing and everything in between for grouper, snapper, amberjack, pelagics, a little bit of everything. If it swims in the Gulf of Mexico, we got a trip to go get them. So on our party boat trips, we go out in bigger boats with a bunch of groups and go out and do a certain type of fishing. Then we have the private charters where they're smaller boats. We kind of customize the trip to what the clients or guests want to go out and catch. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about the nearshore and offshore fishing and whatever you guys want to talk about. I enjoy talking with you guys, not at you. So hopefully you have some questions and we can kind of go cater the seminar to what you guys want to hear. So how many of you guys have your own boat and you do your own fishing out in the Gulf 5-10 miles or more offshore? Anybody? No? So most of you guys are going to be fishing on boats like ours out there. So we're talking a little bit more about that kind of thing today. Stay away from the smaller boat type fishing. But again, if you have questions as we go along, if I'm talking about something you want a little bit more lengthy explanation, please don't hesitate to ask, guys. Again, we want to talk about what you want to hear, okay? So we'll start this off by talking a little bit about what's going on now and what you can expect this time of year offshore. Right now, we're seeing a lot of those red snapper and red grouper and gag grouper. Come on up, guys, if you haven't got raffle tickets yet. So, with the red snapper season open, we're focusing mainly on those red snapper out there in deeper water and trying to get as many of those as we can. Season's in full swing. A lot of confusion over red snapper season. Red snapper is actually open right now until the end of July, even into August. So end of day, August 1st is when red snapper season closes for federally permitted for-hire charter boats and party boats. So right now on private boats, red snapper season just closed July 12th at 12:01 a.m. So private recreational red snapper is over, but you can still catch them on a party boat or charter boat until end of day, August 1st. And keep in mind, guys, with all this bad weather at the beginning of our season, now at the end of our season, we had some real bad weather. So that bad weather stops people from going out fishing, and these red snapper are managed by their quota. So if the quota wasn't full, if they didn't fill that quota, then a lot of times they're going to open another red snapper season or extend it. So I talked to the FWC people, and they are likely going to give an extension on that red snapper season towards October. If you guys didn't get raffle tickets, come on up and grab them. So likely in October, you're going to see a private recreational red snapper season extension. So keep an eye out for that. Inform your family, right? So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be exciting to be able to catch those red snapper now in the fall as well. For our federal for-hire season, we're working on getting an extension, but that'll be a little bit harder to do. The private recreational red snapper, if the quota isn't full, definitely having an extension in October. Also, gag grouper. Gag grouper opened June 1st, and we have gag grouper all the way through the end of the year. Gag grouper play best in months ending in ER, especially October, November, December. My favorite time for gag grouper starts right about Thanksgiving, and it runs through the end of the year. When those cooler months roll through, those gag grouper come inshore and they get more aggressive. So from Thanksgiving to the end of the year, typically we do really well on a gag grouper, and typically you don't have to go too far out to go get them, which is nice. So it's a really great time of year to go target those gags. But right now, you can catch those gags, but we're having to fish really deep to get them. But it works out because we're already really deep for those red snapper. Right now, from about 170 to about 230 foot of water, that's where we're catching those red snapper and gag grouper for the most part. Thanks for coming. So, what do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to talk about? As some of you guys who walked up late, we like to kind of talk to you guys and with you guys instead of just sitting up here and dribbling on about something that I think you want to hear. So, does anybody have a species of fish they want to learn a little bit more about how to catch them today? Fueling. There we go. Sir, if you haven't got a raffle ticket, come on up. Go ahead. Mangrove Snapper. I love me some Mangrove Snapper fishing. It's a lot of fun. Mangrove Snapper are one of the smartest, very hard to target fish because they're very quick biting. I did for yourself. So they're really fun in that manner because they're so quick biting and they're so super smart that you have to really present that bait naturally, and you really have to hold bottom perfectly, and you really got to be quick on the trigger and have the right tools for the job to catch those Mangrove Snapper. So for Mangrove Snapper, you want to make sure you have the right rods and reels to start out. That's the first part of the puzzle. So for Mangrove Snapper, what I like using is a rod that has a really sensitive tip, but also a good backbone. So that way you can feel those little nibbles, but then if you hook a big Mangrove Snapper, you have the backbone to reel that fish in. If you guys haven't got raffle tickets, come on up. So a real light, sensitive rod with a good backbone helps a lot for those Mangrove Snapper. There you go for the fan. No problem. So besides the rod and reel being nice and light, having a good backbone, a sensitive tip, also the weight, if you get a nice light rod and reel, it makes it even easier to feel that bite. And then also having the right reel. You want to have a high gear ratio reel because the higher the gear ratio, the more quickness you have in the reel and the more line you can retrieve more quickly. And if you're retrieving line at a quick rate of speed, that means it's easier for you to set the hook in deeper water. So the higher the gear ratio, the quicker the reel. But unfortunately, when you have a high gear ratio, you also have low power. A low gear ratio gives you more power, but you don't retrieve a lot of line quickly. So it's kind of the downfall there. So for Mangrove Snapper, 5-to-1, 6-to-1 gear ratio, they even make like 7.2-to-1 gear ratio reels now. And those high-speed reels are what you want to use for Mangrove Snapper. The downside is if you hook a big mangrove, or if you're using dead bait and you happen to hook a gag, with that high gear ratio reel, you don't have much of a chance. You have to just get lucky that that grouper doesn't dig into a hole and break you off. So what I do when fishing for Mangrove Snapper is I use these 2-speed reels. The 2-speed reel gives you the option to use a high gear ratio reel, and then with the press of a button, you're able to downshift, and now you have a low gear ratio, more powerful reel in your hand. So it's like using one of these reels, one of the high-speed reels, and then also with the press of a button, using a slower speed, more powerful reel. So the 2-speed reel is really good for Mangrove Snapper fishing for that reason. If you guys didn't get a raffle ticket, you can come up and grab it. So the difference between the 2-speed, or the difference between the speeds is pretty noticeable, and I'll show you that now. So right now we're in high gear ratio. Look at where the lead is at. You can see where the lead's sitting right now. I'm going to turn this handle 1 revolution. So with 1 revolution of the handle, watch how much that lead moves. That lead went pretty far, right? That's high gear. So now I'm going to drop it down to the low gear ratio, and I'm going to do the same thing. So now I'm downshifted into low gear. See where the lead is? I'm going to do 1 revolution of the handle. Didn't move very far, did it? So low gear ratio retrieves less line, but you have more power. So having a 2-speed reel gives you that option to essentially have 2 reels in one, and you have the quickness to hook it. But then if it's a big fish or a big mangrove, with the press of a button, you can then downshift, and you have a fighting chance to get that bigger fish up off the bottom. So that's why 2-speed reels work really well, but minimum, you need a single-speed, high-speed reel for those Mangrove Snapper. So you've got your rod, you've got your reel, As far as line, Mangrove Snapper, again, a very smart leader-shy fish. You don't want to use really, really heavy tackle. Primarily inside of 100 foot of water, you're using like 40, even 30-pound tests if you're in shallower. 30, 40, 50-pound tests if you're out there a little deeper, and then like 4 to 5 hooks. Out there past 100 foot of water, typically about 50, maybe even 60-pound test, and then like a 5, 6 hook. So the deeper you go, the little heavier line, little bigger hook, because eventually you're gonna run into some bigger fish. And this time of year, gag grouper are open. So if I'm fishing for Mangrove Snapper out there in 120, 150 foot of water, I want to be using 60-pound tests, maybe even 80-pound tests, and able to get bites. Because if I hook one of those gag grouper, I want a fighting chance to get him up off the bottom. So using a heavier leader gives you that option. When gags aren't open, typically 40, 50-pound test is what I'm using for those mangroves. A fluorocarbon leader works really well to help those mangrove snapper get enticed to bite, because they can really see pretty well underwater and they can really sense that monofilament. Now, also for mangrove snapper, they're a quick biting fish. They come up and they tap, 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 and then they'll come back around and then they'll get the rest of the bait. What they're doing is they come up and they literally snap at the bait and break it up. And then they do a quick circle, and they'll come back and eat those pieces. You want to hook him when he comes back around to eat the pieces of bait. And you want to make sure that you've got your hand on the reel and you're ready to reel when that fish bites, because you've got to be quick. And you've got to start cranking as hard and as fast as you can. And if he's not there, you got to stop and drop it right back down the bottom quickly. Because with those snapper species, you can get them into a little bit of a frenzy. And once he snaps that bait, he gets the smell going. There's a lot of pieces of bait going. Other snapper are looking. So even if you miss the one snapper, if you drop it back down the bottom quickly, a lot of times you'll have a shot at the same fish or his buddy that was sitting right next to him. Fish are kind of stupid like that. So make sure when you feel that bite, start cranking like crazy. If he's not there, stop immediately and drop it back down the bottom as quick as you can, because you get another shot at it. Also, you want to make sure that you're presenting that bait and holding bottom naturally. Super important with mangrove snapper and pretty much every species. But those smarter, more leader-shy fish, it's really important that you're holding bottom and presenting that bait naturally. So what I mean by that is once you're done baiting up your hooks and you're ready to drop down, you drop down to bottom. A lot of times what happens is what just happened right there. If some of you guys in the front can see it, those of you in the back, what happened is when I dropped down, my hooks hit the bottom, and then my lead fell right on top of my hooks. So now my 6-ounce lead is sitting an inch away from my hooks and my bait. That's not going to be very appetizing, right? You want to stretch that leader out and make sure it looks really natural. What you do is, what I do at least, is when I drop down the bottom, I'll drop down the bottom and I'll let it wait for about 30 seconds to a minute. If I don't get a bite in that first minute, I'll slowly lift my rod tip up to the sky, and then I'll slowly drop my rod tip back down to bottom. And what that does is the current and any movement of the water is going to stretch your leader out. So let me show you up on the counter so y'all can see it in the back. But essentially, once you drop down, your lead a lot of times is sitting right on top of your hooks. So when you lift your rod tip up to the sky real slow, and then drop your lead back down, the current is going to do the work for you and stretch out that leader. So now you went from being right on top of your hooks to that leader being fully stretched out, and that bait being really far away from your lead, which gives you a more natural presentation and which will entice those fish to bite a lot more often and a lot more consistently. Then once you do that, you want to make sure that you're holding bottom so you're not disturbing the bottom. Last announcement, if you guys haven't got a raffle ticket, come on up and grab it real quick, all right? So what I mean by that is holding bottom. Are you guys all together? So what I mean by holding bottom, guys, is when you're bottom fishing, you're on a boat, the boat's not sitting still. The boat's moving up and down, and the boat's bouncing in the waves. Even if it's calm out, the boat's going to be moving up and down a little bit. So it's really important that you're moving your rod tip with the boat. If the boat's going down on a wave, you got to move your rod tip up. If the boat's going up on a wave, you got to move your rod tip down. You got to consistently work and pay attention to make sure that you're not disturbing that lead on the bottom. Because if you're just holding your rod tip steady, talking to your buddy, drinking a beer, not paying attention, what's going to happen is your lead's going to, and your bait is going to be bouncing and moving on the bottom. That doesn't look natural. If you're sitting there and you hear this all the time, you're not going to get anywhere near that, are you? I'm not even moving my rod tip very much. I'm only moving my rod tip about a foot. Whereas if you're on a boat with 3-foot seas, that lead's going to be bouncing quite a bit. And sound travels a lot faster underwater. So you have to make sure you're working to keep the line tight enough to feel the lead, but not tight enough to disturb that lead on the bottom. Because even if you're fishing the hardest bottom possible, there's always a little silt or sand layer on the top of that rock bottom. And if your lead moves at all, it creates a little puff of sand. And that puff of sand is all that is needed to scare away that 8, 9, 10, 12-pound mangrove snapper that was holding at the bait. So it's really important you move your rod tip with the boat. Pat, you can come up here for a second. So let me show you real quick what I mean by that. Just put your hand out flat and put that lead in your hand. And just act like you're everything real. So act like the boat's moving. So I'm not even looking at my line or his lead in his hand. And just by feel, I'm making sure that I'm keeping that line tight enough to feel the lead, but not tight enough to disturb that lead. If I disturb that lead, it'd fall right out of his hand. Oh, you're off. Is that me or was that you? That was me?
No, that was me.
Oh. So it's real important to get the feel for that, because the better you are at feeling that lead and feeling that bait on the bottom, the more natural your bait is going to be. That big guy grouper, that big mangrove, that hogfish, these fish are smart. They got big for a reason. They've been around the block once or twice. They've seen a few hooks in their life. So you have to keep that bait completely still. You got to get that leader stretched out nicely. Your bait has to be hooked perfectly straight so everything looks right. Because these fish, they don't just come up and hit your bait. Those big guys, those big fish, they come up and they stare at your bait. They might circle your bait. They might look at it for 5, 10 minutes sometimes. And if you're letting that lead bounce, if you're not paying attention, if you're not what I call actively fishing, which means you've got your hand on the reel, you're moving with the boat, you're paying attention, and I always keep my part of actively fishing is keeping your thumb and forefinger on the line in front of the reel. That gives you a lot more sensitivity. You're going to be able to feel the bite a lot better. So this is actively fishing. I'm constantly moving with the boat. Got my thumb and forefinger on the line. Got my hand on the reel. This is how you should fish. Because that way when you feel that bite, your hand's already on the trigger. You're already ready to start reeling. And then your fingers are already on the line so you can feel that bite. So real important, you want to make sure that you're actively fishing to make sure that you don't miss out on any chances to catch those fish. Also, the other trick to mangrove snapper fishing that is super important is, I've hooked myself here, is making sure that you're using the double snell rig. The double snell rig is a really, really good option to help you have a better hookup ratio. Because essentially you've got 2 hooks in one piece of bait, and that allows you to make sure that you have a really good chance at hooking that fish. So what I do with this double snell rig is I take one of these thread fins or sardines or cigar minnows or whatever frozen bait you have, and I make a plug with it. What a plug is simply tearing off the tail. Even if I was fishing for grouper, you always tear that tail off of your bait. Because as that bait goes to the bottom, that tail makes it spin. You never want your bait to spin. So tear the tail off is always the first step when you're hooking your bait. But for mangrove snapper and this double snell rig, I'll also go ahead and tear that head off. So now I'm left with nothing but the meat, the goodness. And I hooked this very strategically. You've got a fatter end of the bait where his head was, and you've got a skinny end of the bait where his tail was. Which way do you think I'm gonna hook this? I want the skinny end going towards the bottom, so that bait is hydrodynamic and it doesn't spin. So I want the skinny end pointing at my weight. So the first hook, or the hook furthest from the leg, goes in first, closer to the head. And I always go perpendicular to the backbone, which on most of the cigar minnows, threadfin, sardines is delineated by that blue line, or that line between the silver and blue, or silver and green. Go perpendicular to the backbone until I'm out the other side of the bait, and then I turn that hook parallel to the backbone. Now, once I've got my first hook in there, the second hook goes right behind it, where the eye of the second hook was. Same thing, perpendicular to the backbone, and then turn it parallel. So look how nice and straight that thing is. Nice and straight, you can see that I've got a hook. Anywhere that snapper bites that bait, he's likely to get a hook in his mouth. And it's going to increase my catch rate, or my hookup ratio, because I'm more likely to have a hook in that fish's mouth when he bites. So that double snell rig, really, really good when you're fishing dead bait offshore. So almost any type of species of fish that I'm going after, I use that double snell rig when I'm fishing dead bait. Live bait, I would use a single hook rig, because the idea behind live bait is you want that natural presentation. You want that bait to look very natural and lively. I don't want to put an extra hook in it, because he's not going to be as lively. He's going to bleed more, he's not going to survive as long. So with live bait, I'm always single hook fishing. Yes, sir?
What size hooks?
For mangrove snapper, inside of 100 feet, about 4 to 5. Outside of 100 feet, about 5 to 6 on. Now, with mangrove snapper as well, my favorite bait is definitely one of those dead bait plugs, the threadfin, sardines, cigar minnows. But you can also use shrimp for them, and you can also use small live pinfish. To catch a really big mangrove snapper, a small live pinfish is what I would go to, because they really like those pinfish. Now with the pinfish, it's a little bit more difficult, because they come up and they snap at that bait to kill it, and then they come around, do a circle, and then they'll come around and eat the pinfish. So you gotta slow down your tendency to start pulling the trigger and start reeling like a madman when you first feel that bite. You gotta wait a second for it to come around and eat it. Also with mangrove snapper, you wanna use the right hook. The thicker hooks, the 2X strong, the 4X strong hooks, they have a thicker diameter to the wire, to the shank of the hook. A thicker diameter wire is harder for that fish to get into its mouth. A thinner diameter wire is really, really easy to penetrate that fish. And just like if you go to the doctor uses the thinnest needle possible, it goes into your skin easily and you don't feel it, right? If he uses the thickest needle in his cabinet, you're going to be hurt, because it's going to be hard for him to penetrate your skin, and you're going to feel it. So thinner hooks work really well, because your hookup ratio is greater. It's really easy to hook that snapper. Now, also with snapper, a lot of people get messed up with the snapper because they're a very smart fish, even when they're hooked. Mangrove snapper, I can tell you 9 out of 10 times when I'm reeling in a fish, if it's a mangrove snapper, I can tell you what's on my line, because they do the same thing almost all the time. What they do is, when you hook that fish, you start cranking like crazy, you got him hooked. What'll happen is he'll fight real good for the first quarter of the way to the boat. When they're in sight up the bottom, they fight really hard because they don't want to leave the bottom. But once you get them up off the bottom and they start losing sight of the bottom, some clicks, they're super smart. They turn around and they swim as fast as they can up to the boat with their mouth open. So what you feel is you feel fighting, you're struggling, and then all of a sudden you feel nothing. Because he's swimming up to the boat as quick as he can. And if you slow down and stop reeling to be like, oh, I wonder, I guess the fish came off. Well, he will. because they're super smart. They've got their mouth open, they're shaking their head trying to spit your hook. So if you slow down and give him any slack, he's going to be able to spit your hook 9 out of 10 times. So really important with those mangrove snapper, once you got them hooked and up off the bottom, that you keep steady pressure on that fish, and you make sure you don't give them any slack. So you want to constantly keep reeling and keep pressure on that fish so you can't spit your hook. All right? Any other species y'all want to talk about? For mangrove snapper fishing on our trips, a private charter is a great option. You can customize the charter to what you want to catch. If you want to do a party boat style trip, the 12-hour night mangrove snapper trip, literally it's got it in the name, and that's what we're targeting. My favorite for mangrove snapper would be a 39-hour or a 44-hour, because you're out there in the super deep water, you've got a lot of fishing time, and you get to fish at night, you get to fish sunrise, sunset, and all the way through the day. So you get a lot of fishing time, a lot of flexibility to target those mangrove snapper. The 44-hour is 5 hours longer than the 39-hour, and it only happens on the full moon. So that 44-hour gives you almost a full night of fishing time on the full moon when those mangrove snapper really like to chew. So a 44-hour is definitely cream of the crop mangrove snapper fishing. You can get them on a 10-hour day trip. You can get them sometimes on that trip, but it's a little less likely. Because mangrove snapper, they like to feed at night primarily. You can catch them in the daytime, but they're a little fewer and further between. Good question. Any other questions?
What do you get most of the grouper?
Right now, gag grouper are at about 150 to about 250, 300 foot of water. They're out deep. When the water's hot, gags are out deep. They move a lot. So when the water's warm in the summertime, they're out deep. As it starts cooling down, those gags start inching in. Best time for gags is like Thanksgiving to the end of the year. Any other questions?
How is this going to affect the fishing coming this week?
It should be really good. How weather affects fishing is super important. So a low pressure is a cold front or a tropical system. They're low pressures. What happens, those fish, can't find a good example on the wall. Snook. See the black line down the side of the snook? That's called the lateral line. Every fish has a lateral line. Some of them aren't as defined as the snooks are. The snook is. But those lateral lines, what they do is they sense pressure, and pressure changes. So a lot of fish can't see too well, but they have a really, really heightened sense of pressure changes. And that's how they can sense predators and movement in the water. They can also sense barometric pressure changes. So if we have a low pressure, a high pressure approaching, those fish know it and they sense it. So as the low pressure approaches, the fishing is at its best. When you hear about those commercial fishing boats and those charter boats and those private wreck boats that sink as a hurricane approaches, there's a reason why those guys are out there fishing. They're not complete idiots, but what they're doing is they're gambling with the weather, because up to that weather coming through is when fishing is at its best, hands down. Then that weather comes in, the barometer takes a dump, and then all of a sudden the weather gets real rough, it's raining, it's windy, and the fish kind of slow down and almost stop feeding. Especially, this is really dramatically felt near shore, from about 110 to the beach. Because in that shallower water, a 6-foot wave is going to make the bottom really sandy, and those fish just completely shut down. Out deeper, it's too deep to mix up the bottom water, but they do feel that pressure change, and they do slow down a little bit. Now, once that low pressure moves through, it takes a day, 2 days, 3 days for the water to calm down, the water clarity to clear back up, the wind to die down, and the barometer to stabilize. Once all those variables stabilize, the fishing will get really good again, because those fish haven't been feeding well or at all. And then all of a sudden everything's back to normal and they turn on like a light switch and start feeding like crazy. The problem is, before a low pressure, it's easy to predict, because when the barometer drops. When the barometer drops, fishing shuts off. After a low pressure, knowing when the fishing is going to be picking back up is very tough. It's kind of a gamble, you never know. But typically, it's a day, 2 days, 3 days after that weather starts calming down. But it depends on the strength of the front. If it's a really strong front, the barometer moved a lot, it's going to take more like 3 days. If it's really weak, it'll take more like 1 to 2 days. In the case of this storm in our area, it was pretty weak in our area. So it'd probably be 1 to 2 days. I'm thinking like probably Monday sometime or Tuesday morning is when that fishing's going to pick up. And the weather's really, really nice then too. But good question. Any other questions, guys? Question was, how long of a leader do you use for amberjack? Amberjack fishing, I typically use a very long leader for live bait. Reason why is a lot of times you hook amberjack well off the bottom. Amberjack, red snapper, the same thing. One trick that I use for amberjack and red snapper is you don't drop them all the way to bottom. Mangrove snapper, almost all snapper species, and amberjack too, the biggest fish are at the top or bottom of the water column. That really holds true for a lot of species, even kingfish. So the top or bottom of that school of fish is going to hold the biggest apex fish. So if I'm fishing for amberjack or red snapper, why drop all the way to the bottom past all those fish in the water column? So for amberjack and red snapper, I'll hook my bait up, use a little longer leader, and I'll drop the bait down to where I can't see it anymore. It's disappeared 40, 50, 60, 70 foot down. Once it's disappeared, then I put my thumb on that spool and I drop it real slow. And the idea behind that, what I mean by real slow is like real slow. And the idea behind that is you're essentially lowering that bait through the strike zone and you're fishing the water column. So a lot of times you'll hook that fish before you get to the bottom or before you even get halfway down. And with amberjack especially, those amberjack want to break you off in the wreck. If you're hooking them higher in the water column, off the wreck or off the structure, the likelihood of you breaking that fish off and getting tangled with your buddy and losing the fish is much lower. So really good idea for red snapper, gag grouper, a lot of different species to lower that bait really slowly. But you have to have a longer leader. So if I'm fishing by myself or with 2 or 3 of my buddies, I'm using like a 10, 12, 14 foot leader. I get crazy, but a really big bait. But if you're on a party boat with a bunch of other people, you can't get that crazy. 5, 6, 7 foot is all you need. But longer is better because that big bait has a lot of room to get away from that big heavy lead. For amberjack fishing, I'm using something like this big old 9-aught reel with a 100-pound test and a 125-pound leader. A big 10-aught circle hook and a big 8 to 10 ounce lead. So that big 8, 10 ounce lead is able to lower that big 1, 2, 3 pound live bait that I'm using down to the bottom. And that big 10-aught hook is going to hold up to that big 60, 70, 80, 100 pound amberjack. And it works really, really well. Definitely conventional reel is best. At least 80-pound test, but really 100 or 125-pound test is even better. And you want to use monofilament. You don't want to use braid for those jacks. If you use braided line, you'll a lot of times lose fish. You'll cut your buddies off, and if you get tangled up, it's a nightmare. You can't land your fish, and they're going to beat you up. You got that rod up underneath your arm. That braided line doesn't have any shock. So that braid, every time that fish is moving its head or bouncing or fighting or digging, it's just killing your underarm. So use monofilament, use heavy tackle, big hooks, big reel, lots of drag. You want to use at least 40, 45 pounds of drag. You want to use big bait and big tackle. All right? Yes, sir.
So, can you still use braid if you're on the
You could, yeah, you could. Braided line works for a bunch of different applications. Top shot is always required for braided line. In my opinion, I fish monofilament strictly for big grouper, amberjack, in a lot of my deep water bottom fishing applications. But for snapper species that I need a lot of sensitivity on, I fish braided line with the top shot. For jig fishing, I'll use braided line with a very short top shot. For trolling, I'll use braided line with a very short mono or fluorocarbon leader. There's a few other applications that I'm not, flat line fishing. I'll use braided line with a short leader because I want a lot of line capacity. So when you want line capacity or sensitivity, you use braided line with the top shot. If you want to just catch big fish that are going to come up and hammer that bait, you don't need to have a lot of sensitivity because you're going to feel them when you hook them. Monofilament's always better. And in my opinion, I prefer to use mono, but braid gives you that sensitivity that you need in those delicate situations, like snapper fishing out there in 130, 140, 250 foot water. Everybody know what top shot is? All right, for those of you who don't know.
I don't know. I'll say it.
There you go. For those of you who don't know what top shot is, it's essentially a leader before your leader. So braided line is great to give you that sensitivity and a lot of line capacity. You can see here in my spool, I have braided line primarily in there. But I guess this is a bad example because the line's clear. But on top of that braided line, I've got about 50 to 60 feet of a monofilament line on top of that braid. And what that does is that creates a shock absorber. Just like on your vehicle, you wouldn't want to drive a vehicle down the road that doesn't have shocks on it, right? And beat the heck out of you. Well, offshore fishing, if you're using braid and it goes straight to your swivel, you are really, really messing yourself up for a multitude of reasons. Reason number one, braid doesn't have any memory. It's super pliable. So when you're dropping down to bottom, this is something I wanted to go over earlier and I forgot to, so I'm glad I remembered it. When you're dropping down to bottom, the idea of this rig, your egg sinker's on your main line, you got a swivel, you got about a 4 to 5 foot leader. When you're dropping down to bottom, what happens is that egg sinker is pulling your bait down to bottom. And your bait isn't your line. Your bait is either frozen or it's a big piece of bait, or even if it's a small piece of bait, it's got drag, it's got hydrodynamic drag. So what happens is your bait ends up getting really close to your monofilament line as that egg sinker drags it to bottom. So as your egg sinker drags it to bottom, your bait gets really close to your line. And if you're using braided line all the way to your swivel, you're going to get tangled up. Your hook's going to get tangled with your braided main line almost 70% of the time when you're dropping down the bottom. And it gets really frustrating. It's super annoying. And when you drop down to the bottom, you don't necessarily know it unless you can really feel it. And you're not going to catch fish if your bait's all tangled in your line, right? So using that top shot prevents that from happening as often. And then also, it gives you that shock absorber. So when you hook that fish, he's not able to, how many of you guys fishing braid have reeled up a snapper or a grouper and he has a big hole in the side of his face and your hook is just barely sitting in there? Everybody know what I'm talking about? Happens quite a bit. If you use a top shot, it's less likely to occur because that shock absorber is going to prevent that fish from tearing that hole as easily. It still happens. It even happens with mono, but it's not as easy for the fish to do that. And when that hole develops, it's really easy for that fish to spit your hook. That's why it's even more important if you're fishing braided line to keep that steady pressure that we talked about earlier. When you got that fish up off the bottom, steady, steady pressure. Also with the braided line is tangles. If you get tangled with your neighbor, that braid is impossible to untangle. All you can do is just cut. Whereas with monofilament, if you get tangled, 9 out of 10 times you can untangle it. Sometimes it gets real bad, you gotta cut it, but most of the time you can untangle monofilament when it's tangled with other monofilament. So those are some reasons why you wanna make sure that you're using that top shot. And what top shot is again, it's a leader before your leader. My offshore fishing rig, bottom fishing rig that I use 99% of the time, again, it's just an egg sinker that's freely moving on your main line, a swivel and about a 4 to 5 foot leader. So this is my leader in my left hand. My top shot starts at that swivel and it goes about 50 to 60 feet into my main line where there's a line-to-line line. So that's what a top shot is, okay? And the only reason for it is to give me that shock absorber to make sure that I don't lose any fish and it's not beating me up as bad and I don't get tangled and have to cut my line. All right? Real important, I touched on it a little bit. When you catch that fish, what I see people mess it up a lot, offshore, especially on the party boat, I see this quite a bit, is you'll get a big fish or even a small fish and you have light tackle and it takes some pumping. You know what pumping is? Where you're lifting the rod up and then you're reeling the reel down. That's pumping. To get that fish up off the bottom, sometimes it requires some pumps. Once you have that fish up off the bottom and you've got 15, 20, 30 feet of line in your reel or about 10, 15 cranks, do not continue pumping. Once you get that fish up off the bottom, the game completely changes. It goes from brute force, reel as hard and as fast and do whatever you need to do. Fall to your knees and use the rail as a lever if you need to. Do whatever you need to do to get that fish up off the bottom. Then it turns into finesse. Once you get them up off the bottom, it's a finesse game. I always equate it to those fishing video games. You know, the fishing video games where you got the meter and the meter gets red if the line gets too tight. Once you get that fish off the bottom, picture that meter, and you want to watch your rod tip. If my rod tip starts to bend, I start pointing my rod tip at the fish. So that way the bend of the rod isn't as bent, and it's not going to put as much tension on my line. And if that fish starts to run, I stop reeling and I point the rod tip back. So that way my rod tip's not bending. I'm not trying to reel against that fish digging, because I don't want that meter to get into the red. And I don't want to pop off my line. Because in that first part of the fight, when you're doing whatever you need to do to get that fish up off the bottom, a lot of times your line is going to touch the fish's mouth and get chafed, or it's going to hit the rock or the coral or the wreck and get chafed. And a lot of times you really put a lot of stress on your tackle. So once you get him up off the bottom, he can't break you off on anything. Start finessing. Let him run if he wants to run. Point the rod tip at him if he's digging. That way you're not stressing that already chafed or stressed out hook or stressed out leader, you know what I mean? Real important. Once you get them up off the bottom, turn it into a finesse game. And pay attention, making sure you're not putting too much tension on that fish. So often I'll see a really truly quality fish broke off well above the bottom. And a lot of times that's preventable. So only you can land that big fish. You gotta make sure you're paying attention. Any other questions? So the question was, what's my preferred knot between braid and top shot? Typically, for the line-to-line knot, one of the fastest knots is a Alberto knot. Really super fast, can do it on the fly really easily. Then I like using the reverse Albright knot. It takes a little bit while longer, but it's still pretty quick. But if I'm at home pre-rigging my rods, my go-to strongest knot is the FG knot, and then the super strong, crazy 100% strength knot is the PR bobbin knot. But that requires a bobbin tool, a lighter, and way too much time. So the PR bobbin knot's definitely the strongest 100% best. For trolling tackle, for big game, shark fishing, that's what I use. But 95% of the time, it's a FG knot. FG knot's definitely the strongest. Takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of time, but it's a great knot. But on the fly, on the boat, reverse Albright or Alberto is what I'm using. Now, if you ask me my favorite knot for terminal tackle, it's real simple. I tie 2 knots, and that's it. It's either the nail knot, which is the 3 loops around my thumb, pull the loops off, go back, lead back. Hands down, best knot if you're tying a swivel, hook, anything off. The only other knot I use is the Snell knot to do my double snap. Or occasionally I'll do a loop knot if I'm fishing with a lure that doesn't have a split ring. But 9 out of 10 times I'm using that nail knot. 3 loops around my thumb. Best knot, quickest knot, strongest knot around, 100%. You can use it with braid or mono as well. Any other questions? So we got a few minutes here left, guys. I still want to cover a few more things. So Someone brought up amberjack when we talked in the beginning. I forgot to mention amberjack. Amberjack do open August 1st. They're open August, September, and October. So we got 3 months of amberjack fishing coming up. Definitely for amberjack, 12-hour extreme, 39-hour, 44-hour trips are definitely the best. You want to target at least about 130, 140 foot of water or more. You want to get out there deep to those amberjack. Big wrecks, big ledges, that's what hold those springs. That's what hold those amberjack. And big bait, like we already discussed. We've got the kingfish and mackerel run coming up there, end of September, early October. Those fish will come back into the area. They're a lot of fun. Now, I asked before, but now that we have a bigger crowd here, how many of you guys have your own boat that's 20, 25 foot or bigger? Some of you guys. So with your own boat, when those kingfish and mackerel come back into the area, just right along the shore, and you can do this on our party boats on a 5-hour trip or a 39 or 44-hour trip. You troll on those trips. Use a planer and spoon, like a number 1 or number 2 planer, and about 12 to 18 feet of monofilament between the planer and the spoon. And you can, I did it growing up on a 14-foot John boat, and you can do it on whatever boat you want. You only got to go 100 yards, 200, 300 yards off the beach. Troll up and down the beach where you see those bait schools or where you find hard bottom. And you can put a couple rods out and you can have a lot of fun targeting those mackerel. Once you find the bait school where you see mackerel jumping everywhere, you can do figure 8s around it and keep trolling your lines through it and catching fish. Or you can stop and drift through it and throw the gotcha plugs. These gotcha plugs are a lot of fun to catch mackerel on. Just put a little 6 to 8 inch piece of 30-pound wire and you can catch a bunch of mackerel and kingfish. Also, if you're trolling out deeper, some of the great lures for kingfish, tuna, and also wahoo are some of these lip trolling ones. My favorite was always the X-Wrap, the Rapala X-Wrap Magnum. You want to do the Magnum 30 or Magnum 40 when you're out fishing deeper along the beach, the Magnum 20. But these are new to the market. Bass Pro is one of the only places that carry them. These things are awesome. They troll a lot deeper, a lot faster, and they have a lot better quality hooks to them. So we're going to try to bring these into the Marina, but we've been struggling, so we're buying them at Bass Pro too. Definitely a killer lure. One of the biggest wahoos I've ever seen caught on our boat was caught on one of those big nomads. So really, really cool lure for trolling for kingfish, wahoo, tuna, that kind of thing. Now with trolling, a lot of you guys, if you guys would raise your hand that have your own boats, do you do any trolling? Anybody? All right, a couple of you guys. With trolling on our boat, your own boat, the trick is creating that spread. Because part of offshore fishing is getting out there. It's a little bit of a ride out there. And if you've got a slow boat, like a big party boat or a big 60-foot Hatteras, there's a lot of time on your way out there, and trolling is a great way to kill some of that time and catch fish while you're heading out to catch more fish. So you create that spread, and what the spread is essentially you're creating a school of fish behind your boat. So you might have a couple lures on the surface, a couple lures 10, 15, 20, 30 feet down, and then a couple lures like these really cool nomads 50, 60, 70 feet down. And you're creating a spread. So you're working the top of the water column, and you're also creating a school of fish. And you're staggering those lures by 10, 15, 20 feet to make sure when you turn, because when you turn, those lures come together and get tangled. So you want to stagger them. And if you've got a surface lure here, you would put a deep diving lure next to it, and you would keep them about 10 feet apart. So that way when you turn, they can come right on top of each other and even cross each other and not get tangled. And when that fish is looking up from the bottom, he sees all those lures trolling past him. It looks like a school of fish. And you'll what's called raise the fish into your spread, and that's when he hits. So it's a lot of fun trolling for kingfish and mackerel when it comes to that fall run. They run in the spring and fall, anywhere when the water temperature is about 72, 73 degrees, all the way up to water temperatures of about 78 degrees. Also those trees around town, those purple flowering trees, they bloom at the same time. So if you see those purple flowering trees, that's when you know kingfish or mackerel are biting. Pretty cool. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Then when I come, got it, wait, I was looking for you to know how you do it.
Yeah.
I know we used to use double rig bait with it.
Yep.
Now we play already double.
Yeah.
Change up the double purple hook, how do we?
Yeah, essentially the double, when I was a kid fishing, we used those double hooks too. And what it was is we were using the long shaped mustaches, opening the eye of the hook, and then putting the second hook through the eye of that first hook, and then closing the eyelid. It was called chaining the hooks. It allowed you to create a chain of hooks, and you could double the hooks like that. And that was a great method to put two hooks in one bait. But in the early to mid 90s, that double snell became really popular. And the double snell is super, super better. Couldn't think of the fancy word. But when you're chaining hooks, the hooks were chained together, so they didn't have a lot of flexibility to move. Whereas with this double snell, all that's in between it is monofilament or fluorocarbon. So you have a lot of movement between these hooks, and they can move very independently. So this is a much better tackle setup for those snapper species compared to chaining your hooks. But to answer your question, the rule offshore is when you're fishing, bottom fishing with natural bait for bottom reef species, you must use inline, non-stainless circle hooks. So circle hooks work really, really well for those fish that come up and swallow the bait, like grouper, snapper, grouper, American red snapper, amberjack, things like that come up and swallow that bait and run. Circle hooks are what I would use for, and they work well for them. Now, fish that come up and nibble and you want to set the hook, J-hooks do work better for those species, but unfortunately the law is you have to use those circle hooks. So if you rent a rod and reel from us, and you get a rod and reel on our boat, or you rent tackle from us, we must and we will supply you with circle hooks only, because that is the law.
Under 39 hours, is the best trolling on the way out or between sites and when you're already out?
On a 39 and 44-hour trip, the best trolling is always between spots when you're offshore. Because on the way offshore, you're only trolling up to about maybe 40 miles from shore, and you're not into that blue water. So you're catching mackerel, kingfish, maybe a bonita. You might possibly get a blackfin tuna. But in between spots when you're offshore that second day of the trip, that's when you're going to catch the wahoo, the mahi, the tuna, and possibly a billfish. Yeah.
And you make quite a few, stops while you're out there?
If it was up to me, no, because it burns more fuel. But it depends on what the fishing's doing and where we're going in our routes. For example, if we're fishing at middle grounds and we want to move out in the potholes for red snapper, that's a 10, 12 mile hike, and you've got a nice long bit of trolling time. But if you're fishing like, say, the ridge and you're not moving very far, you're only making quarter-mile, 1 mile hikes, then you're not going to have that trolling time in the day. Ultimately, our party boat trips are bottom fishing trips. Everybody on the boats there are bottom fish. Only a small percentage of people want to troll. So we cater to those bottom fishing majority, and we're focused on bottom fishing. But if we make long runs on the way out, you're welcome to troll. And anybody on the boat can troll. You don't need a stern spot to troll. Anybody can troll because those fishing spots that are assigned for bottom fishing, not for troll. So if you have a stern spot, you have first right refusal to troll, but if you're not trolling, someone's welcome to come and use your spot. Now, on the way out, if you hook a fish, generally, like I said, mackerel, kingfish, bonita, we're not going to slow the boat down. So you got to use a really big reel to be able to retrieve those fish while the boat's moving. Even this big 9-aught is small for trolling on the way out because, again, you want to be able to retrieve that 10-pound fish while the boat's underway at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 knots. So you want a big reel, typically 50, 80 wide, 2-speed reel is what you want to use. And you want to make sure you can crank that fish in.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Nope. What's a good species of carp this time of year?
Inshore, I'll I'll say right off the bat, I'm no expert inshore, but this time of year, hands down, would be snook. You can't keep snook, redfish, trout right now because of that release moratorium, but snook fishing is crazy from about late May, early June until about early September. The reason why is all those snook come out of the backcountry and bayous and mangroves and out of Tampa Bay and out of the rivers, and they stack up at the mouth of passes, and during the day they move offshore to spawn on the nearshore artificial reefs. And the small schoolie size, the 14 to 25, 30-inch fish, hang out on the beach all day, moving through those troughs in big schools. So during the day, you fish on the beach, and fish parallel with the beach. You know when you're walking out to the beach, and you're walking out to the surf, and all of a sudden you trip because there's a little hole? That's the trough. That trough is created by wave action, and that is essentially a fish highway. So that's what those fish use to travel up and down the beaches. So that's where you want to put your bait. And that's not past the waves. So if you're casting perpendicular to the beach, might as well give up, because you're not going to catch a lot of fish like that. You want to fish at a 45 to 60 degree angle away from the beach. So that way you're transecting those troughs for a greater period of time. And at night, you want to fish the passes. The passes are loaded with snook. Literally right now, the last 3 weeks, you can't even hold the conversation on the dock in the morning at 4 a.m. because all you hear is pop, 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 pop from snook crashing baits. Pass crabs, big shrimp, pinfish. If you cast out there and let it float on the surface, it's going to get smashed. It's a lot of fun. And also the flare hawk, like the first light style jigs they got over here at Bass Pro. You work those real slowly along the bottom. That's how you catch a lot of the big ones. Like 35, 40 plus inch fish are caught at night. So right now, this time of year, snook fishing at night is hands down the best time to do it. And do it in a pass or on a jetty of a pass. Make sure you're working your bait with the tide. One thing I see a lot of people screw up, let's pretend my table is a bridge. Let's pretend you guys in the Gulf, this is the bed. If the tide's going out this way, and I'm standing over here on the jetty fishing this bridge, the tide's coming this way, those fish are going to be stacked on the back side, that west side of this bridge, hiding from the current. And they're waiting for fish to travel through this bridge, and they pop their head into the current and eat them. So if you're standing on that jetty and you're casting into the Gulf, down current, and then working your lure up current, you're not showing your bait to any fish, and that fish is going to be like, why is that shrimp swimming against the current? And they're not going to eat it. You got to work your bait naturally, present that bait naturally. It's important offshore and inshore. So you got to work that bait with the current to make sure that you're catching that fish. Definitely, I'd say snook to answer your question. Any other questions? All right, we're a little short on time here, guys, so I'm going to start wrapping this thing up.